The Scientific Cooperation Initiative Labsampa, Laboratory for Documentation of Historical Architecture in São Paulo, began in 2017 from the internship held at the Dipartimento di Architettura dell'Università degli Studi di Firenze by Dr. Regina Elena Viera Santos during her doctoral research supervised by Professor Luciano Migliaccio at Faculdade di Architettura e Urbanismo da Universidade di São Paulo. The research included a stage in Florence under the direction of Professor Silvio Van Riel and the collaboration of Professor Stefano Bertocci. Some Italian undergraduate students and researchers in fields of the digital survey were interested in carrying out the 3D digital scanning of a section of Avenida São João involved in the enlargement carried out during the first 2 decades of the 20th century. In this context, the Edifício Baraúna was selected as an object of study. The survey was carried out in September 2017 in the format of a free workshop by an Italian team composed by students Anastasia Cottini and Chiara Alessi and researchers Matteo Bigongiari, Monica Bercigli, Pietro Beccherini, supervised by Professor Stefano Bertocci, with the participation of students enrolled in the undergraduate and graduate courses of FAU-USP. Since 2020, this activity is a part of a new optional topic, AUH 335, Labsampa, Laboratorio para Documentação Histórica da Arquitetura in São Paulo. The objective of the discipline was to combine fieldworks and theoretical methodological dimension of the survey activity to train students in the use of digital technology with a 3D laser scanner in the preparation of documentation for study projects, preservation and restoration of historical buildings. Some case studies were selected to experiment methods of integrating digital laser scanner 3D technology with metric and photogrammetric survey data. The program included intensive field activities during a week. In this period, the examination of a selected building is carried out through computerized processing of digital survey data combined with those of the manual metric survey and photography and photogrammetry. Such dataset serves as a support to produce drawings representing all the results of the varied techniques used during the survey activities. For the representation of the facades, photogrammetry was performed using the PhotoScan software. For the inaccessible parts of the facades, a DJI-SPAX drone was used. Finally, the model obtained from the point cloud produced by 3D laser scanning was overlapped on all these data. Once the survey process was completed, the students, divided into groups, researched the historical documentation related to the selected buildings in the archive. The results of the empirical examination and the historical research were brought together in a text divided in following topics: urban topographic context and plans, authorship, history and analysis of projects, owners, builders, tectonic issues, materials and construction technique of the various parts of the building, aesthetic issues. In addition to the buildings in the downtown, digital survey of historical buildings from the colonial period on the coast of the state of São Paulo were executed. That is, the ruins of the settlement known as the Sítio do Abarebebê in the municipality of Peruíbe, and the architectural ensemble of the church and convent of Nossa Senhora da Conceição and Igreja Matriz de Sant'Anna in Itanhaém, studied by Dr. Regina Vieira Santos and object of the research project Jovem Pesquisador Barroco Cifrado, funded by FAPESP, coordinated by Professor Renata Martins at FAU-USP. The result obtained with the application of this architectural survey and historical methodologies, emphasizing the educational potential of using technology in communicating the significance of building as a document of urban history to the public, led in 2020 to the ratification of a cooperation agreement between the Faculdade de Arquitetura e Urbanismo and the Museu da Cidade de São Paulo, an organ of the Secretaria da Cultura da Municipalidade de São Paulo. As we will see, the buildings chosen as case studies were selected above all for their importance in the history of the urban development of the city, of the techniques and of the construction industry. Below, some selected case studies will be presented. The Edifício Baraúna, signed by the engineer Ricardo Severo, was built in 1923. It stands out for the novelty of the constructive solutions in relation to the average buildings carried out in São Paulo at the time, and the adoption of a neo-colonial decorative repertoire in the facades. The structure is in reinforced concrete and brick masonry, and is covered with mortar, imitating carved stone decoration. The ground floor is all for commercial use, as well as the basement facing the Vale do Anhangabaú. It has an independent access through Avenida São João. Intended to be a warehouse, it has been the place of the historic Restaurante Guanabara during many years. The research made possible to reconstruct aspects of the history of construction techniques and industry in São Paulo, which can rarely be perceived in the current urban context. As can be seen from the previous description, historic buildings have undergone varying degrees of transformation. Often, they still have some original characteristics, as well as decoration and artifacts of interest. However, they are, in many cases, poorly preserved or restored with materials not suited to appropriate conservation criteria. The study of the Edifício Baraúna contributes to the urban history of São Paulo and intends to offer an example of documentation for future restoration and reuse interventions compatible with the needs of the 21st century. In the center of São Paulo, Rua São Bento connects Largo di São Bento to Largo di San Francisco and is part of the so-called historic triangle of the city streets, along with Rua Diretta and Rua 15 di Novembre. From the second half of the 19th century, This street began to receive the main hotels intended to receive travelers arriving by rail. According to the documents found in the Historical Archive of São Paulo, the building of the Grande Hotel branch was initially designed for commercial use with stores on the street level and offices on the upper two floors. It was built by the Portuguese businessman Manuel Garcia da Silva, owner of the Loja do Japão warehouse and responsible for the development of the residential area of São Paulo known as Jardim Europa. Later, the property was rented by Friedrich Glette, owner of the Grand Hotel, to house the branch of this establishment. The original plans of the building and facade, dating from 1807 and signed by architect Oscar Kleinschmidt, show no distancing from the road. The actual built property, another one existed in the site of Rua São Bento, was included. However, it was not possible to specify at what date. The construction combines several techniques, employing masonry support walls, as was usual at the time, along with profiles and metal beams supporting the floors. The openings still have their wooden frames with metal ornaments and stained glass on the upper floors, preserving the original design. Based on the marks engraved on the iron structures, it is possible to verify that they were produced in São Paulo at the Fundição do Brás, belonging to Colonel Francisco Amaro. The current access has steel tiled floors and still preserves the original wooden staircase and elevator. The original roof was probably made of slate tiles, but currently it has asbestos, as can be observed in the photographic records made with the drone. The facade ornaments, made with the same mortar as the cladding, are based on a classicist repertoire. It is worth emphasizing the typical freedom of eclecticism in the manipulation of vocabulary and classical syntax. However, the extensive use of classical elements has an evident symbolic and ideological value. The ornamental language is appropriate to the definition of commercial palace attributed at the time for this type of mixed-use construction, commercial on the ground floor and for offices on the upper floors. In 2019, the didactic laboratory had the important support of the Museo da Cidade di São Paulo and the Istituto Italiano di Cultura. The Florence team and the Brazilian students carried out a digital survey with a 3D laser scanner at the Solar da Marquesa di Santos, a townhouse which underwent several construction phases from the colonial era to the first half of the 20th century. It is today the headquarters of the Museo da Cidade di São Paulo. The building originated from the fusion of two residences located in the old Rua di Santa Teresa, which was later called Rua do Carmo and today Rua Roberto Simonsen. Between the 18th and 19th century, the area was occupied by residences of the city elite due to its privileged position that gave access to the merchants who disembarked from the river to the Patio do Collegio area, where existed some of the main public buildings. The Jesuit Church and College, later transformed into government palace, the Real Casa da Fundição de Ouro, and a theatre. The house was sold to Donna Maria Domitilla di Castro Canto e Melo, Marquesa di Santos, in 1834. It then became the main center of the incipient social life of São Paulo, due to the initiatives of its owner, former favorite of the Emperor Dom Pedro I. At the time, the property had a typical architectural program of Brazilian aristocratic residences from the colonial period: warehouses and services on the ground floor, rooms on the upper floor, with front rooms with balconies intended for social use, and bedrooms in the back. In 1880, the building was sold to the Bishopric of São Paulo, becoming the Episcopal Palace. Renovation that involved a radical change in the building's aesthetic language were carried out in 1889-1890. The original mud walls were jacketed with bricks. There was an introduction of an attic hiding the new roof, which replaced the wide edges of the colonial era. At the rear part of the building, the iconography shows important transformation pursued to adapt the aesthetic language on the back to the classicist precepts that had guided the interventions on the facade. In 1909, the property was acquired by the Companhia de Gás de São Paulo, which was its owner until 1967. Between 1934 and 1939, in part of the backyard space, an annex was built with a new typology and constructive technique using reinforced concrete. The results obtained through the experience of combining the 3D laser scanning with other survey methodologies, archaeological and historical research, even in a very well-known historical building, gave chance of verifying and deepening the studies already carried out. The spread and exponential evolution of information and communication technologies in the heritage sector has led to the increasingly extensive development of digital application and tools for visualization and enjoyment of cultural assets. The course, therefore, led to a better organization of data and knowledge so that, using technology as a real extension of human intelligence, it is possible to contribute to a more effective knowledge of the heritage to be protected in Italy as in Brazil. The results of the survey, carried out with the different methodologies and technique, combined with historical analysis and appropriate forms of communication, will allow the public to perceive the value of buildings and objects as a document of technological and production processes, of conflicts in social history, urban politics, mentality, tastes, and their reciprocal relationships.